Whispers from Eternity demand for the enjoyment of everything with the joy of God. O Spirit, teach me to enjoy Thee in spirit, that I may enjoy the world and my earthly duties with Thy joy. O Spirit, help me to train my senses, that they enjoy only good things. Teach me to enjoy earthly pleasures with Thy joy. Save me above all, from the slightest touch of negativity, doubt, and cynicism. I wanted to begin, as you saw or heard, our topic today is inspired by this reading that we started with on gratitude. And I'm going to read also a passage from the Bhagavad Gita, but I'm going to save that a little bit later, and because it too applies to this, but you'll see it's in counterpoint to what I'm saying. And so, but I did want to start with reading a short passage of what I read before we did the affirmation, just to begin. And Swami, when he was writing here, he says, a person that lacks gratitude, he says, demeans himself because by giving nothing in return, he breaks the cycle of creativity without which prosperity's flow, but both materially and spiritually, is blocked. Now that's something, I think intuitively most people know this, that it's a mark of a mature person. You might say, I was going to say a refined person, but I don't think we need to be refined to understand that gratitude is something it's a human quality that all of us appreciate in other people. And of course, when we have children, it's one of the very first things, one of the lessons of young children coming up is we teach them to be gracious to their elders, to somebody gives them something. And you know how children are, they get a gift and they enjoy it, but they forget. They forget and they run without expressing any appreciation. And the parent slowly teaches them to be appreciative and to express that in an appropriate manner for whatever comes to them. And this is naturally something that most mature adults understand the necessity of that and the appropriateness of that. And you can imagine somebody, and perhaps each of us have met people like that, have perhaps grown up with a sense of entitlement, that everything in this world belongs to me and there's no appreciation necessary. And when we meet people like that, there's a certain disdain that comes in and says, how can a person be like that? They show no gratitude, they take without giving, and nobody appreciates that. And so consequently, it's something I think we all very intuitively understand that we need to, as we develop, we need to be gracious. But one of the important points, and here's Swamiji is making in that reading, is it's a disease to be ingracious spiritually. But what happens is it blocks, if we don't express gratitude, it actually blocks prosperity's flow. Now this is something to consider. Now spiritually, materially, emotionally, mentally, on all the different levels, prosperity's flow becomes blocked when we have an ungracious or lack of gratitude to the giver of that gift, or the giver of whatever the circumstance might be. We find that slowly life begins to close off from us, and whatever is coming to us begins to seem to flow less, and prosperity diminishes. So it's a very practical, if you want to just certainly look at it that way. The little child may look at it that way. They say, well, if I show appreciation for this gift, I'll get another one. And I mean, they intuit this very quickly, in a very selfish way. But beyond that, and then we grow a little bit beyond that, and we realize it in a little bit more expansive terms that we need to express that gratitude. Now, I've often seen, and perhaps you've seen articles such as this in the newspaper. From time to time, somebody will write an article about gratitude and expression or being thankful. And the article might start by things to be thankful for. And so consequently, they'll interview people and say, well, I am thankful for the beautiful day that that I'm experiencing, or I'm thankful for the wonderful friends that I have, or I'm thankful for the blessings that, I've spiritual blessings that I feel coming to me, or whatever elevation. It might be very material, or it might be friendships, or it might be spiritual, and people will express these thanks. And they're always very nice articles, and nice articles like that as reminders that we should be grateful. But there's an interesting, usually in these articles, there's often or rarely do I see somebody saying, oh, I'm so thankful my business went bankrupt last week. Or I'm so thankful, that there was a death in the family. Obviously, the person's not going to be thankful for that side of things. Or I'm so thankful that, that I fell and my arm was broken. Now, we're not thankful necessarily for that. But yet, on another level, we must learn to be grateful for whatever comes to us on the highest expression of what gratitude is. Because ultimately, as devotees, God is in all circumstances. God is coming to us in many different ways. Now, interestingly, a story that I was speaking with somebody last week about this topic in a different context. And some of you may remember, just to illustrate this point, some of you may remember about 3 years ago, I think it was, Satyasai Baba made a visit to Pune, and outside of Pune they set up a place there, out in the countryside, and tens of thousands of people came for his darshan. Tens of thousands came, and he was there for a series, many days he was there, so tens of thousands come repeatedly. Well, as it happened, on one of the days, the chief minister, I believe it was a chief minister, if they have such in Mumbai, the top person in Mumbai of the city came, and to receive a special darshan, special blessing. And of course, because of his political status, he was ushered to the front, and he had right there, was given a special blessing, and so on, and he went on his way. Well, about 5 days later, you may remember if you read the newspapers, and remember this, in Mumbai, there was a large scandal about this building that was reserved for veterans. That was reserved, and of course, how these things sometimes go, there was a bit of a scam and favoritism and so on, and he was implicated in that. And ultimately, through a series of events, he had to resign from his position. Now, he received the blessing, and consequence, very shortly after this came. Now, you might say, when we were talking about this a while, I thought, oh, maybe he saw it as a blessing. What a blessing! He was able to work out his karma very quickly through this situation. But I said it a little bit in a joke, because I don't think he saw it as a blessing. But yet, I think a devotee, a true devotee, might make that connection. A person such as Satyasai Baba, who blesses him, it's not to bless him. People go for blessings with the anticipation that I am going to receive something that pleases me. And when it pleases me, we call it a blessing. Isn't it so? I received a blessing. But what about those other ones? You see now, a man of God looks at it entirely in a different way. He's looking at it not what pleases you maybe right now, your body, your situation, what pleases your soul. Ultimately, it's measured upon what is going to take you more quickly to your divine goal. That's what is pleasing in the spiritual sense. And perhaps, I have no idea what the meaning of that series of events were, but it could have been taken in that way if the person chose to. I suspect he didn't, but it could have been. And then so quickly to be able to expiate our karma, did it take us closer to God? Did it take us closer to liberation, to being able to find the divine in our life? That's a real blessing. If we can take what happens to us in our life in that way, then truly everything is a blessing. If we can see it in that way, the circumstances that happen to us. But unfortunately, when we think of gratitude, we tend to be grateful for those things that we like. But really, gratitude, in its perfection, is learning to expand our sense of appreciation for not just the thing, the circumstance, but yet, you might say, for everything. And it's interesting, gratitude, properly understood, is when we have the attitude of gratitude, we find that somehow life itself supports us. Where the law of supply and demand somehow works in our favor. Now, we usually think in terms of the other way. Something happens, and then I'm grateful. But take it the other way. Be grateful, and then something will happen that will help you in whatever particular way, or that will be a blessing to you, because sometimes what we think of help may not actually be that. But ultimately, if we have that proper attitude of being grateful, we'll find that life somehow works out for us in the best possible way. So it comes first, and then what happens after that takes its natural course. Now, there's a story that Swami Kriyananda used to tell many times. And those of you who knew Swamiji firsthand, I'm sure probably have heard this story, but some of you may not. By the way, I don't think I even introduced myself when I started. I'm Nayaswami Jaya. I'm Nayaswami Jaya, for those of you who I haven't been properly introduced to. And I used to be stationed here in Gurgaon, but lately I've been from down south of Pune. But a story that Swami would like to tell often in this regard is the one about the king who liked to go hunting. And he would go hunt, and he had a chief minister, or the prime minister, or the chief minister of the realm, who he would take with him and like to go hunting with him. So the two of them would often go off and go hunting. Well, the chief minister had this habit, or he had this way of expressing himself, and an attitude that whatever happened in life, he would say, it's all for the best. And this is how he approached life. It's all for the best. So they went out hunting one day, and in the process of hunting, the king was shooting his bow, and somehow his finger became caught or something, and he lost one of his fingers. Obviously very painful, and he was angry within himself, perhaps, in circumstances. And the chief minister, at about that point, what does he say? It's all for the best. Now, that in some circumstances, the king might have just let that go. But if here he was in a situation where he was angry and he was in pain, And he became even more angry at the chief minister. Well, don't say it, he's saying such a thing, it's all for the best. So they went back, he threw the chief minister in the dungeon. Ha, all for the best. So, in you go. So the chief minister went into the dungeon, and the king went on about his business. Well, his wound healed enough, and so after it healed, at the earliest possible time, he went out hunting again. But of course, the chief minister was in the dungeon, and that's where he was going to stay. And so he went out hunting by himself. Well, in the day, while he was hunting, he was accosted, captured, kidnapped by a band of brigands. Folks, they got him and stripped him of all his possessions. And now these thugs had a ritual that they would sacrifice their victim. And so they had a very good sacrifice. And so they began to sacrifice the victim. And at the appropriate moment, they noticed that the king was missing his finger. Now, this wasn't good, because they only gave to the deity a perfect sacrifice. They couldn't offer something that was imperfect. And so consequently, they relented and they stripped him of all of his possessions, but then they released him. So the king, grateful now, and realizing that it was all for the best after all, made his way back to the kingdom and went to the dungeon and let out his prime minister and says, "You were right. It was all for the best." He says, "But what about you? It wasn't all the best for you. You ended up in the dungeon." The prime minister said, the chief minister says, "Ah, my king, you see, it was all for the best. If I had not been in the dungeon, I would have been with you. And I have all of my fingers." And so you see, this attitude, this is the attitude. It's for the best. In a sense, you can take that a little bit deeper. You see, yes, it is all for the best. Why is it for the best? Because ultimately, if we realize all things are gifts coming from God, and if we can have that attitude, and we deal with things appropriately, but we see that behind every circumstance in life, there's something there for us, some perhaps lesson. Maybe it's a little bit difficult lesson that we need to also, what is this in this situation? So we fall, we break the wrist. Now that doesn't seem, how could that possibly be a blessing? We don't know. In the immediate, it might not appear that way. But yet, what happens, we tend to judge things in a very different way, see things in a very different way than the divine sees them. And some karma there. I think if we can learn to take everything that comes to us in the highest sense, see that there's a divine meaning in that, in our response to that, we find that somehow life begins to work. We don't say, "I want this and I'll accept that," but not that, not that, not that. We begin to live, if we live that way, we're living by our likes and dislikes. But if we learn to transcend the likes and dislikes and say, whatever comes of itself, as Yogananda used to say, and Swami would often say this as well, whatever comes of itself, let it come, and then respond appropriately. But don't allow your joy to be stolen, your peace of mind to be stolen, because outward circumstances should not be able to shape the man, the wise man, of his steadiness of Dharma, steadiness of inward stability. Now, with that as a preface, I want to read the Gita. Krishna is speaking to Arjuna. The Blessed Lord said, "To you who have overcome the carping spirit, I now reveal the sublime mystery. Armed with this wisdom, you shall escape all evil." you could say, I chose that one because what we have, and I chose to start with the positive side first, you might say, you have the two poles, the carping spirit on the one hand, and you have here the gratitude on the other. And of course the carping spirit, that spirit of whatever happens, one finds fault. Fault finding, the yes, but, there's the glass is half empty, it's not half full. That tendency to see the negative side in something that is a mental disease, you could say. It's a spiritual disease, but of the intellect, that always is picking, it's a misuse of the intellect, which is our friend, and if used in a good tool, if used properly, but it's a misuse of that tool. And it causes us great suffering, because what it does, ultimately, it creates a doorway or a blockade around ourselves, just as gratitude, as it said, opens the doors. This carping spirit closes the doors. And Krishna says to you, Arjuna, who have overcome the carping spirit, I reveal these truths. Because it's only when we overcome that mental tendency that of you could say, of complaint, of carping, of fault finding, only when we can overcome that tendency do we open the doors to allow us to be able to even receive spiritual knowledge. And you could look at it like this. Carping is a disease of the intellect. When it's misused, what happens is it blocks the flow of intuition. Intuition cannot operate. Without intuition, we cannot have spiritual perception, because intuition is the tool of spiritual perception. So when it's absent, it's impossible. It would have been impossible for Krishna to be able to reveal that to Arjuna. So he's overcome that carping spirit. Now I mentioned this in relationship to gratitude, because gratitude is a perfect antidote to the carping spirit, that criticalness or that misuse of the intellect, which is a mental part of the reasoning side, but yet gratitude is something of the heart. And this, if we have that tendency in ourselves to that carping, fault-finding side of ourselves, it's difficult to overcome it. It becomes a habit. It's the mind, we can't control the mind. As Arjuna says, how can you control the mind? How can you control these mental habits? What do we do? And because it's of the mind, it's of the intellect, a perfect way to address it is to not try to not be carping. I mean, it's a good, start there. I mean, that's, you could say in any overcoming of a bad habit, if one is we have to block it and say, okay, I'm not going to do that. But if you just left it there, you may not be successful. The positive side is to transfer your attention to the heart and develop the heart quality in countering that misuse of the intellectual side. And if you think about gratitude, think of it is where do you feel gratitude? It's a quality of the heart. And the beauty of gratitude is that it's very, very accessible. When any attitude of the heart involves love, but if you tell somebody, feel love, I don't feel love. How do you feel love? That's not easy for everybody to do. Or if we do feel love, we tend to personalize it so much that it's too personal. So how do you feel love? Well, we can feel it through gratitude. It's a very easy and accessible way to be able to develop the heart quality of the love within the heart. So we begin to feel gratitude first, like the little child, your gratitude for the things that come, the good things, all the good things. And we all have some. We also Try to feel gratitude for that. Yes, I'm appreciative of that. But then you can begin to expand it from there. So it's a good, so I think everybody can feel gratitude for something that you were given that's positive you like. It's not hard. And then you begin to expand it. And then you begin to expand it, those things that come to you perhaps unbidden, that may be a little bit more difficult. And you begin to see the divine hand in that as well. They're neutral things. That, okay, I'm grateful for the weather. I'm grateful for things that are maybe not so personal to you. But yet then you can begin to expand it beyond that to everything. That comes, good, bad, it's all coming, and I'm grateful for that. Now, but still, you can take it a little bit further and divorce it entirely from whatever's happening to you. You see, this is, you might say, a little higher level of gratitude. It's not based upon any outward activity or outward circumstance at all. It's something that's just innate within you. You're grateful because you are part of God's creation. There's a presence of gratitude within you that's a natural quality of your divine self. That there's nothing stimulates it. It's spontaneous in its own right. And when you can begin to feel that, you begin to notice that life outside of yourself is providing you all sufficiency in whatever your needs are and your situations, and you can see that everything in life is yours. That God's life, God's world, God's blessings, it all belongs to you. And there's no sense of separation that comes. And this is a very practical, I won't say easy, but it's accessible. It allows us to feel very tangibly this expression of divine love that comes. Because from gratitude, when experienced and once you feel, it's an expression of love. You begin to feel gratitude, and naturally, just as the child is grateful for whatever the parent might give, ultimately the child then begins to expand its sense and loves the parent. At first, it may be his love because he's given a present, not love when it's scolding. But yet, as we develop, we love the parent, whether we're giving gifts or whether we're scolded. I was reading some writings of Master yesterday, and it was about his guru appearing to him there in Bombay before he went back to America in 1936. And Sri Yukteswar says, I scold you no more. And there's a reference there that Sri Yukteswar was a very hard disciplinarian, and Yogananda says he was a very hard disciplinarian. And then the Master says, oh Master, scold me 1,000 times, where that in your scolding, I see it. He saw within that scolding an expression of his guru's love. And he said, but Yukteswar says, no, I scold you no more. But Master was, or Yogananda was at that point where everything, even the scoldings, he saw behind it that it was just an expression of his guru's love for him. And I think if we can develop this quality of gratitude, we begin to see that everything is ultimately, it's an expression of Divine Mother's love for us. And the good things, seemingly good. The bad things, seemingly bad. All of them are the Divine Mother chastising us sometimes, patting us on the back at other times. But all of them, whether one or the other, just like a parent, good parent to a child, they all are an expression of divine love. And when all is said and done, the child grows up, it's just love. And they look back and say, yes, even those times when the parent was difficult on the child, it was all done through love. And I think then we can see back what our true relationship is with the Divine Mother. It's one of love. And the way to approach that is through gratitude. Many blessings to all of you. And thank you all very much for hosting me today.